welcome back to Through the Trapdoor. I'm Katie.
And I'm Emily.
And this is our podcast where we read you Harry Potter fanfiction.
Yes, it is.
And we have a friend here today.
Hi!
It's Tori! Yay! We finally got her here.
Feels very overwhelmed because this is the second time that we've recorded this intro now.
I know, it's the worst. Well, it was all like feedbacky and double playing us. It sounded like we had a stutter.
Yeah, the microphone was broken. Don't worry, we fixed it.
It's been 2 weeks since we recorded, so that could be why.
Yeah, I haven't updated my computer in a while. Good times.
It's great times. Wonderful times.
Yeah.
And here's hoping we can get all this done.
I believe in you.
You believe in me? I have 18 pages to read today, guys.
You got this. I mean, you can always cut it sooner if you really...
Well, we'll see what happens.
Too overwhelmed.
Because there seems to be a weird multi-person conversation that I get to read at some point. So that's going to be fun.
That's not it.
Yeah, somewhere in here. I'll find it.
I'm excited for you.
But we're on chapter 8.
Finally.
Christmas at the Cottage.
Do you have any, guest questions you want to ask Tori to introduce her to our audience?
We should probably, figure out what your house is and how you're involved in fan fiction, you know.
Yeah.
Be actual podcast hosts.
We're good at podcasting.
We're great at this.
All right. Ask away. What do you want?
So, Tori, what house are you in?
I'm Ravenclaw.
Just like me.
Ooh.
Yeah.
We've known each other for, 11 years now?
Yeah.
Jesus.
I know, it's been a really long time.
Yes, we used to work together in retail.
Yep.
Good old Delia's days.
So long ago.
It was, forever ago.
Yeah.
My goodness. But what got you into Harry Potter or Harry Potter fan fiction or both of them?
Well, the fan fiction is you,
That does sound accurate.
which I feel like might be a thing with a lot of people in your world.
I mean, yeah. Let's be honest.
But will date myself, but I'm older, so, I grew up, I remember waiting in line for those books to come out, and, staying up all night when you weren't supposed to so you could read them.
Yep.
So when you got to school the next day, no one could spoil nothing.
Yeah, because you've already read it all.
You've already read it, and you're like, I got it, come on, throw it at me.
See, I was that kid who had to let people, not talk to me for, a week, because I had to wait for the audiobook to come out.
Oh, yeah.
Which is the worst. Until, Half-Blood Prince, I think, when they released them on the same day.
Oh, that was nice.
So I got it the same day, and I think I finished it to, a 10-hour audiobook. I don't think I think I listened to it straight through.
Yeah. I don't think I've ever listened to the audiobooks.
Oh, I am a lover of Jim Dale, and that is a hill that I will die on.
Yeah.
Audiobook lovers are very divided.
Yeah, because there's
There is Jim Dale and Stephen Fry, and I will die on the hill of Jim Dale.
All right.
I've never listened to the Harry Potter audiobooks.
My goodness, how am I the only one?
I've listened to the Narnia audiobooks.
I have never read and or listened to Narnia, so there's that.
I have not. I've just read them.
Well, I'm outnumbered now.
That's alright.
But I don't know. There's something I like reading. I like physically reading because I can create a world inside my head.
Yeah.
Where when I listen to audiobooks, I feel like they put emphasis on certain words that I may not have if I read.
Yes.
Right.
So.
And they, the thing that I love about Jim Dale is every single character has their own voice and their own accent. He literally did over 500 voices in one of the books.
Yeah.
Which for me is amazing as somebody who can't sit down and read the books myself because I'm very dyslexic and it would take me a fucking year to read one book. That it's nice that I can just sit and I can escape into that world when I'm driving or when I'm cleaning the house or any of those things. I can always just go back to it.
Yeah. I'm nodding my head people can actually see that I'm agreeing with you.
This is not a visual
I know.
medium, but we do that all of the time.
We do.
You're like, yes,
Yes,
I agree with that.
agree. Mhm.
Oh, I have to use my words. That's right.
Yeah. You get used to it after a while.
No,
No.
you don't. I'll like nod and I'll like make hand gestures. Like people can hear me and hear those things.
Surprisingly, they can't.
I mean, my movements are not violent enough to be heard on the microphone.
Except that one time we knocked the microphone over onto ourselves. That's why we went with this instead.
It's a nice setup.
We did have it on the floor and it
Knocked it
fell
over.
on us
We kept,
often.
Yeah, we kept knocking it over.
Nice.
There's that one day it fell on us like 4 times.
Yeah. And like it would slowly like
Drift down.
get lower and lower.
It just slowly drooped.
no.
Mm-hmm.
Until that one time we tightened it with pliers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Oh well.
Now we have this lovely setup mounted to the wall and everything.
Makes it much nicer.
It makes it so much easier to record too because we're not like constantly moving the microphone here and there.
Yes. All right, are you ready to read your 18 pages?
Yeah, I'm ready to get into this, I guess. All right. Chapter 8, Christmas at the Cottage. I do not remember what happened last time.
Sirius, you found out who Sirius is. Love Admirer is the secret admirer.
Yes.
Oh yeah,
It's the third year.
Wendy?
Yeah. And she got in a
was
fight.
she friends with Wendy?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, was
I
it
don't remember.
Alice? Maybe?
No, Alice is Alice Longbottom. Well,
Oh, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
not Alice Longbottom yet, but
Yes.
Soon to be.
soon to be Alex Longbottom.
Yes.
But they got in a fight, and Lily made friends with her because she was in a fight.
And the shoes.
And the shoes.
Yep, and the
And the Quidditch game.
Quidditch game with all the shoes and yeah.
I know, because we were gonna not read the Quidditch game, and then we realized, damn it, we have to read the Quidditch game.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think that's pretty much it.
All right.
They all became friends again.
All right. Typical high school aged drama.
Yes.
Yeah.
All right. November after the Quidditch game flew by very fast and melted almost imperceivably into December. Some professors sped up their lessons so they could finish everything up nicely before the Christmas holidays. Others were less worried. Professor Binns, for example, plowed right on through the wizarding immigrations of 1770 to 1820 as though there were no holiday approaching at all. The only thing that kept Lily awake through this particular History of Magic class was the thought that she'd be going to a meeting about Auror training program immediately after.
I don't think that would keep me focused.
No, I think that would keep me very unfocused. Although it didn't say it was keeping her focused, just awake.
Fair.
But I would nap right on through Professor Binns' classes, so I was fully prepared for my Auror meeting.
Same.
So I was more awake for that.
I'm not a napper, so I wouldn't.
I know, you're not.
You're like, no.
The previous meeting had been rather uneventful. Professor McGonagall, upon realizing that every student in 6th year was trying to eagerly jam into her office for the meeting, had sighed and requested that everybody who wasn't a prefect should leave because they probably wouldn't have a chance of getting in otherwise. This, while not unexpected, made several students very unhappy. So unhappy, in fact, that they attempted to curse several prefects, only to have the curses go haywire and perform the exact opposite of their intent. But it sent people to the hospital wing nonetheless. Those who had done the cursing had been given a detention apiece. At any rate, Lily managed to stay awake enough so that when the bell rang at the end of the period, she was the first one out the door. She was among the first to arrive in Professor McGonagall's office as well, though she had not managed to beat the slew of Hufflepuffs who had just finished Transfiguration. Students trickled in through the door in small groups, except for the Slytherins, who all managed to arrive together. Among them, Lily picked out Severus Snape and Lucius Malfoy, both equally detestable boys, although Malfoy wasn't quite as slimy as Snape. I think he's more slimy, but that's fine.
Yeah.
Lily's own friends arrived only shortly after her, save Alice, who was already there, and the Marauders, who showed up just before the professor, as usual, laughing hysterically about something or other. They came over to Lily in a huge bubble of movement and noise, and swallowed her up with their glee. Lily discerned between shouts of laughter and exclamations of excitement that an enchanted pair of fuzzy pink bunny slippers was now hopping its way around Professor Throne's potions dungeon. Just seconds before Professor McGonagall stepped in the door, the Marauders shut up and composed themselves as though they had been equipped with some sort of miraculous professor radar since birth.
That does seem accurate.
It does. I don't think anything exciting is happening, huh? McGonagall wasn't entirely fooled, however. The second she entered her office and eyed the Marauders sharply as though she knew they'd been up to some kind of mischief, the rest of the students also fell quiet, and McGonagall considered them all for a moment before speaking. Do you all have your papers written then? There was a great rustling sound, and all of the sixth-year prefects reached into their bags for their papers. Wait, why are there so many people there?
I don't know. I was just gonna let it happen.
I just realized, there's only supposed to be prefects there.
Maybe they let, top of their class hang out too?
I don't know. I'm stressed now.
Last time they said, the fifth years were going to try to get in there, too. So maybe they pushed the fifth years out.
I don't know, but I feel like it's all of the Marauders, and they're all in the same year.
I have no answers.
Okay, great. I like that it took me until now to realize that there were too many people there, but that's fine.
It's fine.
There was a great rustling sound as all of the sixth-year prefects reached into their bags for their papers. They had been asked to write about why they wanted to become Aurors. Good. You will all place them on my desk in an orderly manner. Dumbledore, I, and the rest of your heads of house will read them and post a list of prefects who are to come to the next meeting in the Great Hall before the Christmas holidays. You are dismissed. That's not much of a meeting.
No.
They just gathered to hand in papers.
Also, there would only be, 8 of them there in that meeting?
Yeah.
Are there only 2 prefects per year? I know there are only 2, head girl, head boy, one in each.
Yeah, I think that there's only one, girl and one boy prefect per each year.
Right.
So,
They start at fifth year.
Yeah, so there's multiple years of prefects, but there's just one boy and one girl from each year.
Because there should always be 6 prefects per house at any given time.
Mm-hmm.
Plus head boy and girl.
Yeah, so there should only be 8 people in this meeting.
I feel like the heads of houses could have just collected these papers, and this meeting did not need to happen.
Also, aren't they sending all of the prefects anyhow?
I'm so confused by this.
Oh, no, wait. They said that 6 years could, I think, either last week or the week, last week, because I was driving to work. And I remember listening to this in Concord. You guys talked about how they said the 6 years could apply, but most likely that they would pick the prefects.
Okay. So maybe more people are applying.
All right.
I forget what the line, but the line went something along,
it
because
was
some
only
people
6
were hoping
years.
that a prefect would decline.
Yes. Yes.
All right.
That sounds accurate.
The hum of excitement in the room immediately flattened as all of the students realized they would not be doing anything fun or hearing about anything interesting, and that some of them would not be able to return. Many of them had not taken the paper very seriously and had gulped nervously, positive that their efforts would not have been enough. Peter Pettigrew was one of these. Obviously, because you're a freaking little rat. Enjoy your weekend in Hogsmeade, McGonagall called as the first students filed out the door. This brightened the mood considerably as the students remembered that they had a weekend of butterbeers, candies, and Christmas shopping ahead of them. Lily returned to her common room immediately and began working frantically on all of her homework, so it would be done before she departed for Hogsmeade the next day, and she intended to spend the entire trip exhausting herself with buying Christmas presents and didn't plan to leave between the shopping and the wrapping any time for studies. Mimi entered the common room shortly behind her and spent half an hour leisurely painting her toenails before begrudgingly picking up her potions book and beginning her homework, while she could still get help from Lily. "So have you heard the plan yet?" Mimi asked. They had neared the end of their essay. The importance on being precise why some potions' ingredients must be picked under the full moon. "Plan?" Lily echoed, measuring her parchment. It was just long enough. Good. She didn't want to have to add to this essay again. "Yeah, we're all going to meet at the three broomsticks tomorrow as we get into Hogsmeade." Lily frowned. She and Mimi both had several groups of friends and wasn't quite specific enough. "Who's we?" "All the Marauders, duh," Mimi said, rolling her eyes. "Oh, we, right. Well, I kind of already had plans," Lily said, rather distractedly, as she was now fishing around in her bottomless bag for her half-finished herbology essay.
She needs to use a summoning charm.
It's very simple.
Honestly, girl.
Accio herbology essay. Into her hand.
Didn't Harry Potter do that in the 7th movie where he's digging around for the,
Dittany.
Yeah, the Dittany.
Mm-hmm.
And then he says...
Yeah, and then he's like, "Oh, wait, I'm a wizard.
Yep.
I can just summon it from the bag."
Yep.
I mean, they're cut from the same cloth.
True.
That's true. Mimi busily perked. "Plans? What plans? Do you have a boy? Oh, James is going to be so jealous." Lily giggled and shook her head. "No, not those kinds of plans. No, I'm just going to go Christmas shopping for everybody. But I suppose I could stop by the Three Broomsticks first and say hi to everybody." "Well, of course you can," Mimi chirped, and then frowned down at her essay. "Oh no, Lil, what are the words for the severing charm? I started writing my history of magic paper beneath my potions essay again."
Whoops.
Lily walked down to Hogsmeade with Alice, Matt, and Susie. It was cold, and the wind was chilly. A light snow had fallen last night and crunched pleasantly under their feet as they walked. Lily found herself clutching her cloak more tightly around her and shivered once or twice as they reached the village. She parted with her friends at the entrance of the Three Broomsticks, where inside she found the Marauders already making a ruckus. The only thing they seemed to show up early for was food. Sirius and James were at the bar, charming Madame Rosmerta, the young, rather attractive new waitress, and Remus, Peter, Melody, Mimi, and Mundungus Fletcher were over in the corner, dragging 2 tables together, making room for all of them. Lily took off her gloves and stuck them into one of her many pockets of her cloak and pulled down her hood, shaking her long, curly, red hair free. It was already frizzing horribly, though she had put an anti-frizz charm on it only an hour ago. "Then why aren't you in a warming charm?"
I don't know. In the winter, don't you just pull your jacket closer instead of, throwing on a scarf?
"No, I like scarves." She sighed and pushed her hair out of her face, frowning a little. Not even magic could tame her stupid red curls. "They're not stupid!" Lily was suddenly aware of someone staring at her and let her eyes wander around the room. They came to rest on James, who was waving her over from the bar. Madame Rosmerta was now busy fixing drinks behind he and Sirius. Lily smiled and waved back and wound her way through the already crowded bar carefully. "Hello, James. Hello, Sirius," Lily said as she reached the bar. "Lily Bean," Sirius said happily. "I'm so glad you could come." "Come on, Lily, we have a table," James said, grabbing her hand rather impulsively and dragging her across the floor to the half-full table at which the rest of the Marauders were seated. Mimi and Melody's eyes immediately flickered to Lily and James's intertwined hands, and Lily blushed and immediately withdrew hers. Sitting herself down carefully in the empty seat next to Remus at the end of the table, James sat down across from her, and Sirius sat next to James, right next to Melody, who was in turn next to Mimi. Now, I'm not reading the rest of this.
Oh my god.
They're all sitting at the table together.
There we go. I like that.
Madame Rosmerta came over a moment later, carefully balancing 2 trays, one in each hand. A magical tray holder followed closely behind her and set itself up next to her. So if you can make the tray holder follow you with magic, why don't you just float the trays over to them with magic, and then you don't have to leave from behind the bar? What?
No.
Don't be silly.
Mm.
Magic doesn't work like that.
Okay. She carefully set down the tray in her right hand, began distributing the 8 butterbeers she had on the other tray before turning back to the first and setting 3 baskets of cheesy fries on the table. Ooh. Enjoy, she said, picking up both trays and walking away. The magical tray holder was waddling its way through the crowd behind her. The Marauders attacked the cheesy fries eagerly, honestly, same. All but Lilly. She had just eaten breakfast. Apparently the rest of her friends had skipped that step this morning. She did sip on her butterbeer gratefully, however. It warmed her insides, and she was still chilly from the walk and hugs. Do you want cheesy fries, Lilly? James asked with a mouthful of food, offering a near-empty basket to her. Lilly giggled and shook her head. I'm not hungry. James shrugged and ate half of what was left in the basket. Sirius snatched up the other half before he could get it all. Lilly giggled again. Once the cheesy fries were completely devoured, the Marauders all took up their butterbeers and downed them in nearly one sitting. They seemed to all be working on clockwork. So, James said, wiping his cheese-lined mouth with a napkin. Lilly was impressed. The boys were usually oblivious to the fact that napkins even existed. Who's paying? Everyone dug in their pockets, in Mimi's case, their purse, for money, and gathered up a pile of sickles and nuts to pay for their meal. After Sirius and James had collected the money and paid, the group split. Melody and Mimi went off to look at shoes in Gladgurs?
Glad rags?
Glad rags? Why did I add an extra letter to that? In Glad rags wizard wear, apparently it was a shared obsession. James and Sirius set off to see if anything new had arrived at Zonko's. Mundungus, after unsuccessfully trying to get Remus to go with him to the Shrieking Shack, went with Peter instead. Remus went off to the post office to see about sending an owl to his second cousin Hector in Uruguay. Why?
Okay,
Lilly went off on her own Christmas shopping for everyone as she had intended. I also just realized I feel like it was just Christmas like 3 chapters ago and now it's Christmas again.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. She went first to Honeyduke's where she bought candies for all of her siblings. Next stop was Zorcan's Charmed Gifts, a store that sold normal, everyday objects with enchanted charms on them. Among them were self-brushing hairbrushes, self-applying makeup kits. This was sometimes annoying. The makeup applied itself as soon as you opened the container. And if you tried to wipe it off before closing the container again, it'd be a battle with you to chance to reapply it yourself. Quick quotes, quills, self-tying ribbons, self-watering plants. Some of these items were allowed to be used only in the wizarding world, but most had the little red Ministry of Magic stamp approval on the package, clarifying the gifts okay to give to muggles. Why would these gifts be okay to give to muggles?
I mean, if you're a wizard buying for your family.
Yeah.
Like...
I mean, yeah, but self-applying makeup, no. But the self-watering plants and self-tying ribbons, I'm sure would be fine.
Yeah, those ones are probably the ones that have the stamp on them.
Yeah, all right. But only those who were aware of the charms placed on the gifts and were prepared to follow the accompanying instructions in order to keep the magical nature of the gift hidden from other muggles. Lilly had gotten Dean self-tying shoelaces last year. She bought her dad a self-watering plant, her mom a self-curling curling iron. Yes, I want that.
Me too.
And then a roll of self-tying ribbon for herself to aid in her present wrapping. Also brilliant.
Mm-hmm.
Lilly put her hood back on and stepped out of the store and bumped into the first person she came to.
Were you walking with your eyes closed?
I think she might have been. Sorry, Lilly said automatically, barely glancing into the face of the person she had ran into. There were too many people shopping to worry about who you ran into. She was constantly being bumped into herself.
Are they all shopping with their eyes closed?
I feel like they are.
Is it just that crowded?
I feel like I have been plenty of places in my many, many years of retail. I don't think I've ever been constantly bumped into.
No.
I've worked many a Black Friday.
The only time that's happened is at, like, the St. Anthony's feast. That's packed.
Yeah, but that's different.
Yeah, but what if it's like that? What if...
Alright.
Well, because, what is it? 3rd year and up?
Yeah.
Yes.
So you're thinking 3rd to 7th years.
Right.
All going to Hogsmeade
Alright.
to buy Christmas presents.
True. This weekend could be particularly packed for present buying.
Yeah, alright. Lily! The person cried. Lily looked up, blinking. Oh, James, hello! She looked around for a moment, frowning. We're serious. I thought you two were inseparable. James smiled. Well, he did have to buy me a present, you know. He's making a big production of it, again, and he won't let me see what he's getting onto. He made me stand with my eyes closed to the count of 20 so he could run off. He smiled wider. He's going to end up getting me the same thing he does every year. Every flavor beans, a bag of dung bombs, and whatever happens to be in the small display window at Quidditch Supplies Unlimited.
That does sound like an accurate gift that
Yeah.
Grace would get.
But it also sounds like a lovely gift for James.
Yes.
So what are you going to get him? Lily asked. James grinned even wider, if possible. I've had his present since July, he said happily. Lily laughed. What? But she didn't get to finish her question because several people came out of the door of Zorkans and nearly ran them over, and she had to dodge them. I think we should get away from this door, she said, and she and James began walking down the street side by side. Lily drew her cloak close around her, teeth chattering, body bent against the wind, but James walked easily beside her, seemingly unaffected by the cold. You look cold, James said, amused. Aren't you? Lily demanded, looking up at him amazement. A door, James muttered, taking out his wand. Lily's eyes widened in surprise as her body suddenly warmed from the outside in, and the wind, while it still whipped against her face, was no longer bitter and cold. Where'd you learn that? Lily asked, impressed. My mom, James said, shrugging. Lily nodded, wondering for probably the 1,000th time since she arrived at Hogwarts what it would have been like to grow up in a wizarding family.
Also, like, you're telling me that you're in 6th year and you haven't come across warming charms.
Like, seriously.
Ever.
You've also been going to Hogsmeade for 3 years. How's nobody else who's been in a wizarding family taught you this?
I feel like they don't learn all of the charms, though.
No, but I feel like the warming charm somebody had to have, like...
She's also a Ravenclaw. Her head of house is the charms professor.
True.
So, come on. James casually reached over and took her hand as they wandered down the snow-covered streets of Hogsmeade. Lily's cheeks glowed happily, and she made no move to pull her hand away, rather enjoying the feel of it tucked up inside James's. Lily spent the remainder of her weekend wrapping presents with much aid from the self-tying ribbon. The next week of school was the last before the Christmas holidays, and the decorations were coming up, and Lily was sad that she had to miss Christmas at Hogwarts this year, but was glad to be going home all the same. On Tuesday, she met Wendy and Lynn in the library, as promised. She had found them at a table with books and papers spread out all around them. But they weren't working. Instead, they were giggling over something. Hello, Lily said, joining them. How have you been? Lynn giggled. We've been spying on people. Lily frowned. That's not... Wait, Wendy cut her off. You want to hear this? That 6-year Slytherin, the one you hate, Snape? Lily asked, and Wendy nodded. Yeah, she said, and began giggling as well. What about him? Lily asked curiously. He has a girlfriend, Lynn squealed, and then burst into giggles again. Lily made some sort of strangled noise and fake gagged herself. Snape? Get a girlfriend? Ew! Who? Lily demanded, her hands on her hip. She's a 7th year, Wendy said. She's a Slytherin, Lynn added. Yeah, she kind of has a square-shaped face, and she's always has her nose turned up at people. Yeah, she's really not very pretty. Well, she would be if she had gotten that expression off her face. Yeah, like there's some nasty smell in the room. She has pretty hair, though. Yeah, it's blonde. We're not really sure about her name yet. Yeah, but I think it's Narcissa, the girls finished together. Lily snorted and then began gagging herself. Narcissa? She asked, shaking her shoulders. That's Lucius Malfoy's girlfriend. They're always on again, off again. She's probably trying to make Malfoy jealous. Do you think it'll work? Wendy asked. Probably. Malfoy was jealous of Snape in the first place. Snape's always gotten higher marks than him. Then she rolled his eyes. But enough about that. Now it's time for studying. The third-year girls groaned. Melody rushed into potions class on Wednesday morning, face flushed, clutching a letter in her right hand, all of her books completely forgotten about in the girls' dormitory. You will never believe this, she said, panting and slumping over a potions table, behind which Peter, Remus, Sirius, and James were all sitting. Lily and Mimi were standing. What? They all said collectively. Melody's face broke into a silly grin. My uncle is going to take me to Switzerland for Christmas holidays. The other marauders all began speaking at once. Melody only caught snippets of their exclamations. Went there skiing once. A good time. Not fair. Good for expensive resort. Afraid of heights. Too cold. Horrible skier. What an uncle like. Send me a postcard. That was Lily. Melody hadn't really been able to discern who was talking about what, but gathered that James and Sirius had gone there once on a skiing trip. Sirius had liked the food. James had run into a tree. The rest was a bit of a blur, but the rest of them seemed to be jealous enough to make Melody happy. Well, yeah, you're going to Switzerland for Christmas.
That is pretty exciting.
I mean,
Just then the bell rang, and Lily, Melody, and Mimi dashed to their table, where they were joined by Arabella Figg, who had just entered the class, panting. What took you so long to get here? Melody whispered as Professor Thorne strode into the class, swaggering pompously, and began taking roll. Melody thought she saw Arabella blush, but was hard to tell because her cheeks were already pink. Forgot my book, she whispered back and then ducked her head into her bag and began searching for said book before she could be questioned about it any further. On Thursday, Mimi, Melody, and Lily were to be found in the library with Transfiguration, Charms, and Potions books laying open before them, alongside of scrolls of parchment still glistening with newly printed ink, with sugar quills, real quills, and assortment of ink bottles scattered amongst them. There was just enough room left on the table for the girls to rest their elbows because after finishing the grueling potions essay, none of them were in the mood to write another one. Only one more day till the holidays, and still McGonagall assigns us another essay, Melody muttered, twirling her quill around in a bottle of ink as she lifted a sugar one from the table and stuck the end of it into her mouth, sucking on it as she glared at her half-completed essay. I'm too excited to think. Lily sighed. It doesn't seem fair, she agreed. But all the same, she did assign it a week ago. Mimi snorted. Not that made you jump right into it, she pointed out. Lily shrugged. I tried to start it last week, but I couldn't get into it. Mimi laughed. Get into it? You sound like you're talking about a book. If I ever started getting into a transfiguration essay, please someone Avada Kedavra me. This statement had a profound effect on the easy, carefree atmosphere of the table. Melody's face immediately hardened, and she bent over her parchment, suddenly intent on writing her essay. Lily half smiled, but her stomach half twisted unpleasantly. The whispers about the wizard and muggle killings were quickly turning from rumor to fact, and the name Voldemort was beginning to strike fear in the hearts of witches and wizards across Britain. Oh, Mimi said softly, covering her mouth with her hand. Lily stared at the floor for a moment and then looked up, frowning in thought. Did you guys hear Snape has a girlfriend? She said suddenly, and both Mimi and Melody snapped their heads up in her direction in surprise. They both burst into giggles, and Mimi's careless comment was forgotten. On Friday, the 6 years were so noisy and boisterous that even Professor McGonagall gave up trying to teach them. Instead, she let them turn in their essay and succumb to a round of questioning about the Auror training program. They really didn't learn much except that no, their essays were not done being evaluated yet, and they could please come up with a different question because they all knew perfectly well that the list would be posted outside the Great Hall before dinner. After Transfiguration, Lily and Mimi headed off to their last class of the day, double herbology with the Hufflepuffs, and the Marauders headed off to Care of Magical Creatures with the Slytherins. Lily and Mimi had a rather exhausting time of running around the grounds and zapping all of Professor Sprout's plants with anti-frost spells, which had worn off just yesterday, and Professor Sprout hadn't had enough time to zap them again. By the end of the lesson, Lily and Mimi were of the opinion that they needed anti-frost spells, but didn't say it to the professor. The Marauders came, hooting and hollering from Care of Magical Creatures lesson, quite excited. They'd gotten to spend the entire lesson chasing around fire squirrels, which apparently warmed up everything within a 10-foot radius and had kept them all much warmer than the herbology class. Lily spent the remainder of the afternoon in the girls' dormitory packing her trunk up for the holidays with Mimi. She'd finished all of her assignments for over break, so she didn't need to bring any of her books, and that lightened her trunk considerably. She also left behind 2 pairs of shoes and most of her Hogwarts robes. She really wouldn't need them at home. On top of her clothes, she had tossed her bottomless bag and spent several minutes debating whether or not she should bring Hera her owl's cage home. She would be fine at the owlery, but if she delivered a letter to Lily over the holidays and wanted to rest, wouldn't she be miffed if Lily hadn't brought her cage with her? Then again, she didn't really feel like lugging an empty cage through King's Cross either. Just use a shrinking spell on it, Mimi advised. That way you can just put it in your trunk and you won't have to mess with it unless you need it. Good point, Lily said, following Mimi's advice. After they were done packing, they sat and talked for about an hour and then, unable to wait any longer, dashed down to the Great Hall to see if the Auror list had been posted. It hadn't, but there was such a large crowd of 6-years milling around in the hallway that it was hard to tell. Mimi and Lily wound their way over to the Marauders, who were being loud and ridiculous as usual. Several minutes later, Professor McGonagall appeared at the top of the stairs at the end of the hall. When she saw the waiting crowd, she rolled her eyes and had to fight back all the 6-years once she reached the bottom of the stairs. They had all crowded around her in a vain attempt to see the list. "Please," Professor McGonagall said, "would you all calm down? I will not post this list until there is order in the hallway." All the 6-years immediately quieted, and those hovering around Professor McGonagall backed away and cleared a path to the wall for Professor McGonagall. She walked briskly over to the wall and set the list on the wall with a spell. Disappeared into the Great Hall before the large group of 6-years clamoring to see the list crushed her. Lily and her friends were too far away to see the list, but Sirius and James fought valiantly through the crowd and shouted over all the commotion that they had made it, including Peter. The train smelt like pine and leather, with a faint aroma of chocolate hanging in the air. Sprigs of mistletoe hung over every compartment door, and trays of chocolate were found inside each. Lily settled into a compartment with Melody and Mimi, and James and Sirius, Remus, and Peter took the compartment right across from them. They had left the doors open so they could yell over at each other if necessary. Sirius and James quickly took advantage of the open doors by running into Lily's compartment and stealing their tray of chocolates. I mean, seems accurate.
Yeah, rude.
But rude, yes. Melody relented by calmly summoning both trays of chocolate in the Marauder's compartment over to hers and sliding the door of the compartment closed. They all had fought over the chocolates for the first half hour of the journey from Hogwarts. But after there weren't any chocolates left to fight over, so they let their minds turn to other matters. Before they knew it, the train had pulled into King's Cross. They were let out of the gate in 2s and 3s, James and Sirius first, then Remus and Peter, and Lily and Melody and Mimi followed shortly behind. Mimi spotted her family first, gave Lily and Melody hugs, and then promised to owl over break, trotting off to meet her parents. Lily watched as Peter happily greeted his parents, and Sirius, James, and Remus walked over to meet the Blacks, who were standing next to the Potters, who were standing next to Lily's parents? Oh no, that was not a good sign. Oh, there's my uncle, Melody said suddenly, pointing to a rather large man in a business suit who was standing almost by himself, a teeny little woman who Lily assumed was the witch with short curly blonde hair, who was wearing a short professionalish red dress, accompanied him. I'll send you a postcard, I think. If I can remember your address. Well, I'll owl you anyways. Bye, Lils, Melody said, giving her a hug and running off. Melody's uncle gave her a disapproving look, and she slowed to a walk, grinning back at Lily sheepishly. Bye, Lily called, waving, and then took a deep breath and walked over to her parents, preparing to meet her doom. The last time they had been like this with the Potters, she had wound up spending an entire week of her summer at James's house. Okay, so not everything about that had been bad, but still. Hi, Mom. Hi, Dad. Lily, her parents cried, and turned away from their conversation to hug their daughter. Lily gave them quick hugs and then stepped back. She didn't want to make a scene in front of James. What were you all talking about? Lily asked, rather bluntly. Smooth, Lily. Smooth, she thought to herself. Oh, just things, Lily's mom said happily. We'll tell you about it in the car. Farewell, Lily Bean, Sirius said, sounding too dramatic about it, and giving her a huge bone-crushing hug. Lily coughed, pushing herself away from his embrace, and said, thanks, Sirius? You're welcome, Sirius said happily, and then turned to walk off with his parents, who looked altogether very exasperated with him.
Same.
Like, honestly. Bye, Remus, Lily said. Bye. Then Lily turned to James, and they both hesitated. An awkward silence passed between them. Should they hug, or kiss, or what? Happy Christmas, James, Lily said finally. Happy Christmas. They waved, and both turned their separate ways. So, what were you talking about? Lily demanded of her parents as they reached the parking lot. Well, the Potters invited us over for Christmas dinner, Miss Evans said happily. Lily stopped in her tracks and stared at her mother, mouth agape. No! She cried. Her parents stopped and turned to look at their daughter. Well, what's the matter with that, dear? Didn't you have a nice time at the Potters last summer? Mr. Evans asked. Why are they saying Mrs. and Mr. Evans instead of Mom and Dad?
I don't know.
All right. But, Lily sputtered, we're going to miss Christmas at home? Her mom laughed. Of course not. We'll open presents in the morning and have your father's famous Christmas breakfast and then head over to the Potters at noon. But, Lily began again. Her dad frowned. It's already been decided, Lily. There is no use fighting it. Let's not ruin the holidays over this, he said reasonably. Lily sighed. Sorry, Dad. She hated it when her parents were right. Petunia was less happy about having Christmas dinners at the Potters than Lily. But Mom, she shrieked. She and her mom were having a private conversation in the kitchen. This didn't really work. Petunia was yelling so loudly Lily could have heard her from her bedroom. However, Lily was not in her bedroom. She was conveniently in the pantry getting a snack, so she could have heard her sister whether she had been yelling or not. They're wizards, Petunia, not convicts, and they're very nice. Mother, they're freaks, Petunia hissed. Petunia Elizabeth Evans, I never want to hear you use that word when talking about magical folk again. Do you understand me? Yes, Mom, Petunia mumbled. Good. Now, we're going over to the Potters for Christmas dinner, whether you like it or not, and I don't want to hear another word out of your mouth about it. And out of the kitchen. I have supper to fix. Petunia stomped off, and Lily stood frozen in the pantry, a bag of crisps in her hand. Freaks? The Potters were not freaks, especially not James. And Lily certainly wasn't a freak either. Freaks? How dare she? How dare she talk about wizards and witches like that? Lily rolled up her bag of crisps angrily, nearly threw them back on the shelves, and stormed out of the pantry. Her mother looked up, startled. Lily, I didn't realize you were in there. Are you a freak? Oh, yes, I'm a freak because I'm different from Petunia, and that means I have to be a freak. Oh, no, she's not a freak. No, no one in the wizarding world would have called her a stupid muggle. Naturally, it must be me who's wrong. Me who's the weird one. Me who's all alone in her oddity. God forbid I act differently from the great and perfect, wonderful Petunia. Lily finished her speech seething and stomped up the stairs to her room. She never got there, however. Petunia stepped out of her room and confronted her sister first. You think you're all wonderful because you're a witch? Petunia hissed. Well, let me tell you. No, let me tell you, Lily interrupted. I'm not wonderful because I'm a witch. I'm wonderful because I'm not one. Because I'm not like you. Sure, I have magical blood in my veins, but that doesn't make me better or worse than you. You're afraid of it because you don't understand it, because you couldn't possibly comprehend it, and most of all, because you don't want to. Just because something's different, Petunia, doesn't mean it's wrong. With that, Lily brushed past her sister and flew into her bedroom, flinging herself onto her bed where she began crying. Petunia would never forgive her for being a witch. Not that Lily was going to ask for forgiveness, but her sister made out like Lily had decided to be different on purpose, when really she had no control over it. She and Petunia had always been competitive at everything, at grades, at beauty, at hair, at piano playing. They even competed against each other in ballet when they were younger. They had gotten along when they weren't battling it out for something or another. But now the race was over. All the fun and games were gone. Petunia and Lily didn't compete anymore. They just fought. Petunia, if Lily ever had the audacity to ask her about it, if Petunia ever felt like being truthful about it, would probably say that she had been cheated out of her win. And Lily had done some sort of trick to make her a witch and Petunia a muggle. That she would have won had Lily not been different, not been a freak. Lily didn't know if Petunia had been serious about it or not. She probably had. She'd always hated the idea of Lily being a witch, which Lily didn't quite understand. Dean had been happy for her. Why couldn't her sister? Lily sighed. She knew for the most part she had just explained the logic to herself for the 1,000th time. Petunia felt cheated. Daisy idolized Petunia, so Petunia wanted to hold a grudge against Lily. So did Daisy. James was so lucky he didn't have siblings. And that's the end of this nonsense.
All right.
That was so much.
That was a lot of things happened in that chapter.
So much happened.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. All right, well, I guess we'll see you later.
Seems like Katie's super done.
You're like, no more words.
I don't want any more words.
All right, well, I guess we'll see you guys next week.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you so much for joining us on our journey through the trap door.
Please leave us a review on Facebook or iTunes. It would literally mean the world to us.
It really would.
You can find us on Facebook and Instagram at Through the Trapdoor 16 or on Twitter at The Trapdoor.
And please send us an email at throughthetrapdoor16@gmail.com with any story suggestions. And as always, join us again next Saturday as we travel through the trapdoor.